Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Benoit Dalbert. I'm a project manager at Creative Business Cup, and it's my pleasure to host this webinar on the future of music. Thank you very much for your time and for participating in this webinar. Just a few words about CBC. It started as an initiative in 2012 as a competition for creative industries, and since then the competition has been taking place every year, and the network has grown, so that now the network comprises of about 80 partners from all around the world. You might have seen that since April, we have been running a series of webinars, so the CBN Webinars on Wednesdays, and today is the 12th edition of our series. Before we dive into today's topic and before I introduce my speakers today, I would like to hand the floor back to Caroline, who will explain to you how we're going to use Mentimeter tool to ask for your opinions during the webinar. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Benoit. So we are going to be using a tool called Mentimeter. It is extremely simple. We'll just do a test run now. So you should be seeing a shared screen here. You can see that there is a website that you need to go to. It is called www.menti.com. You can do so on your mobile phone. There is a code. It's 418836. And the little heart there in the corner of the screen will show how many people are actually going in right now. We're going to be using this to ask you guys a couple of questions throughout the webinar that the speakers have provided. And we'll just start with a little test. So the first question here will be about where you're zooming in from. And as the slide just said, there's a reminder of the code always on top of the slide whenever you go there. So if you go to menti.com, as you can see, people are already doing it, it will generate the answers to your questions. And here you can see how many people and where people are zooming in from. Perfect. So we have everything from Denmark to France to Connecticut to Latvia, Italy, Germany. Great, thanks. Good to see you guys. Iceland as well. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so this is what we'll be using throughout the webinar. So grab your phone whenever we run to the Mentimeter session. So Benoit, back to you.
Thank you, Caroline. So today, this webinar will be focusing on the future of music, and I have the pleasure to be accompanied by 5 experts who will accompany me throughout this webinar. Most of us have noticed that the music industry has adapted itself in the past years. One can argue, though, if it's just the beginning or the end of the process, and we will see today that new series of innovation and transformation are looming. I would like to introduce briefly our speakers. First, we will have the pleasure to hear from Mes Krogh. Please raise your hand, from Aarhus University, explaining us about the trends in the music industry. We will then hand the floor to Robert Borges from GAFA, which is a Danish music magazine. Then we'll move on with Andreas Nielsen from Danish music publishers Coda. So we will hear from the publishing sector perspective. And then we will open up our horizon and go west to Iceland, when we will hear about 2 success stories from 2 startups with Haraldur Hugason, CEO of a company called GENKI Instruments, and finally Jon Thordarson from Mozilla, who will tell us about digital musical education. So as you can see, the program is pretty thick and pretty rich. So let's not waste time. And I would like to hand the floor back to Caroline for our first Mentimeter questions. Thank you.
Brilliant. So on your screen in about a couple seconds, we'll be going back to Mentimeter. So if you grab your phone, we would like to ask a few questions. They should be up on your screen now. The first question is, what does music mean to your interest in the cultural and creative industries? You'll have a few options there. So go ahead and put in your answers. You go to menti.com and you use the code 418836. Okay. Just give a few more seconds because we see suggestions coming in. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so some of you have no immediate relation to music in your work, and a few of you do. Great. We have one additional, which is if you would please provide 1 to 2 keywords, which state your primary engagement with music, professional or otherwise. So go ahead and put in your keywords. Again, it's at menti.com and you use the code 418836. Lover and consumer coming up as the first. Great. Machine learning, okay. We also have a drummer here, music journalist, management, live education. Wow. Perfect. Thank you guys so much. I just want to say that all of these results will also be shared with you after the webinar.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Let's now start with our first presenter, Mesro from Aarhus University. Please, the floor is yours. You will talk about the trends in the music industry.
Okay, thank you very much, Benoit. As said just before, I'm from Aarhus University. I'm an associate professor at the School of Communication and Culture, and I'll try to address some tendencies pertaining to musical life over the last decade or so, and which may perhaps be extrapolated to give an idea about the future of music, although as a researcher I'm perhaps not too much for prophesizing. And we're kind of a mixed crowd here, so I suppose to some of you this will be a bit of repetition, while for others perhaps there may be news here, but we'll see. The most prominent tendency, I would say not only of the last 10, but say 20 years, is of course the thorough digitization which has swept through more or less all areas of music culture. So today, consumption is of course, well, perhaps apart from my study here, a matter of digital services and devices as opposed to buying records and downloading or listening to the radio. Streaming has taken over as the primary means of accessing music, and also the primary means or the primary source of income for the recording music industry. And music is accordingly widely, I would say, regarded as a kind of infinite source which may be turned on and off like water, or like an ongoing personal soundtrack to furnish everyday situations, or create atmospheres, or energize activities, or enhance every moment, as one Spotify ad has it. And this is a significant development because it opposes a traditional notion of music as works, and relatedly the way the music industries used to be centered around the production of albums. So with streaming, the playlist is, in a sense, I would say, as important as the album. Curational services have become as important as artistic work, I would say. And moreover, digitization has made it easier to pick and mix forms of music that used to be divided by age or by genre, which has made such differences less important for listener identification. So with another Spotify catchphrase, we should perhaps skip the tribes of the music tribes of generation past and rather consider context as the new genre. In turn, this of course prompts services that allow listeners easy, flexible, interactive, preferably novel ways of soundtracking or curating their personal musical lives. There is, of course, a kind of dark side, if you will, to this provision of contextualized music curation, still from the perspective of consumers. in the sense that streaming services rely on listener data and profit from serving data to commercial partners. Because music is so intimately connected to everyday practices, it's also considered an efficient technology of surveillance. So perhaps increased clarity in terms of data management is also something that's called for in the future of music. And simultaneously, we are seeing increased attention to metrics, to the capacity to process data and advanced music intelligence as a basis for management in the realm of record labels, booking agencies, distribution platforms, and so forth. And I think one of you asked a question about music metadata, and that's of course something which plays into this, but which is, I think, immensely complicated to sort. I'm not sure that there's going to be a smooth solution to that anytime soon. The distribution of music in everyday life via digital services converge with its employment in a vast range of media products, film, TV, games, apps, ads, etc., and also contexts such as shops or cafes or other commercial environments. So for the music industries, this of course means possibilities for synchronization deals and distribution, and the distribution of licenses, which are of great economic importance. Whereas for artists, media convergence means branding opportunities. And this is also, I would say, a prominent tendency that artists have to collaborate with and develop themselves as consumer brands. In fact, some studies show that whereas this used to be the case primarily for high-end artists, it's now a common condition, a kind of threshold, if you will, for building a career. So far, I've talked primarily about digital developments, and of course, ignored the counter-reaction, if you will, that we're seeing in terms of vinyl enthusiasm and thus a type of music consumption which clings to the notion of albums as artworks and attentive listening. More significant, however, I would say the vinyl renaissance manifests an eventification of listening. That is, album listening staged as an event of particular value, and this correlates with the economic importance of live music. International booking agencies are key players in the music industries and have been for a long time. The number of festivals are booming, and studies show a tendency towards increased professionalization of ticketing and the management of festivals and live venues. And all in all, this have led to rising profits in the live music industry. However, with the contextual turn in streaming, or as with this contextual turn, live music involves a total experience of not only music, but settings, venue, staging, and so forth, along with preparation, sharing, and recapturing the event via social media. So live music is a business of event making, and as such intertwined again with a range of other businesses regarding food, facilities, communication, tourism, and so on. So again, we're seeing a kind of, if you will, spread in the music industries. Just to wrap this up, I thought I would say just a few words about the current COVID-19 crisis, which is already a topic of various research projects, and which have, of course, been devastating to the business of live music. However, I think my point would be that for the music industries as a whole, and not least due to the digitization that I've talked about, consequences are perhaps less severe, as many forms of musical activity may, in fact, or at least to some extent, continue, perhaps even thrive despite demands for social distance. So in that sense, I think there is hope. But thank you for listening so far.
Thank you very much, Mads. And I think that you have made the perfect transition to our next speaker, Robert Borges, who is going to elaborate on the future of live events. So I suggest we move on to the next speaker right away. And maybe after your speech, Robert, we might take a few questions from the audience. So Robert from GAFA, so please introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, everyone participating. I'm starting out with a boring slide with a blue spot, but my introduction of myself is that I'm been employed or been practicing music all my life, and I've been working in the media side of the business for 30 years plus. GAF is a huge magazine and platform for music in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, with about 1 million unique users per month. So that is my job. But beside the job, I decided to work alongside with the media business, with the analytics and with events. And in the beginning of this crisis, I, as one of the first in my community, started to see of the long-term effects of the COVID-19 crisis within the music. In Denmark, we have a pretty good social system. Not many venues or musicians are gonna starve to death, but I still think that the business as a whole needs to look at the long-term effects of this crisis, what it would do to the audience. And if I can have my next slide. This is the current situation. Almost every venue is totally empty and without no possibilities of actually getting anything going for them. So this is a pretty tough situation for everybody involved, and especially for the economy. In Denmark, there's about $6 billion kroners in revenue per year. So you can see that like for a quarter lost in revenue is pretty devastating to everybody. Next slide, please. In the beginning of my study on my interest for this long-term effect, that was published analytics from Reuters in the US, who stated that only 40% of Americans would turn up and return to music, concerts, and sports before a vaccine for COVID-19 was discovered. And that is, of course, pretty devastating when you don't know when the vaccine is there. And to engage or to apply that to the market where I'm interested in, the Danish market, I have started a survey to discover more about this reluctance to return to live music. Next slide. So first, I started without asking the same question as the Reuters survey stated, and for the market that we're in, it's not that bad. Of course, this survey is done 3 weeks later than the Reuters survey, but it stated that 76% were ready to go to concerts and other kinds of live events like theaters and sport when the possibility was there. The rest they were in doubt and they were afraid. So I'm going to elaborate on that. Next slide, please. So 24% said I'll go right away, and then 40% said I will go in 3 months, and in 6 months 9%, and only about 5% of the Danish population said they would wait for the vaccine. So it showed actually there was a pretty good chance that the live industry could recover from this COVID crisis. But when you go deeper, you will see a different picture. Next slide, please. Because one of the problems is that the whole COVID-19 thing has scared people of big crowds and being close to each other. So that's a pretty severe damage to live music itself. Best explained in this slide, where you can see that if you take it from the right, only about 23% has no limit to the kinds of events they will attend. And the question was, would you attend with those 10,000 or more in the audience? And if you look at the numbers between, as of the numbers counting from 10 to 500, that's about half the population say, I have a limit of 500 people in the same room or at the same event before I can go. So you can actually see that we should take care of how to actually get back to normal, or get back to a situation where people are not scared to go to live events and big concerts. As from my first slide, the big empty Royal Arena, it's going to take a long time for them to fill a 15 capacity venue. That's my learning. Next slide, please. And also, if you look beneath these numbers, you can see it's obviously young people who are not afraid. So you can see that they are not afraid of going to big events. That's the light color. And of course, people the age of 65 or older are not going at all. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. So probably we are heading towards small-scale festivals, human-sized festival, and for the big ones that we might all have attended when we were slightly younger, it may take several years before we find a way, in the absence, of course, of a vaccine against the virus. We have received from our participants a question concerning live concerts. And the question is, let me read it out. How can we taste live events flavor by the time of digitalization of music? So is there a new trend emerging from some bands that they will simply try to play live to reach out to a wider audience, reducing costs, reducing risk related to health? And how is that a sustainable business model for them?
I'm pretty sure that this crisis has developed into live attending, or pretty much the digitalization is live streaming, and the economy of live streaming has been accessed by certain communities in different ways. Some have been donations, some have been ticket sales online. But how to taste live music the way it tasted in the old days, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure that this crisis has in a good way made it possible for bands to actually engage with their fans in other ways than in concerts.
So that would require them to be more adventurous and more creative when it comes to playing in front of no one, knowing that there might be thousands of fans sitting on their sofa, but they can't see them and they can't feel the passion for music.
I think I saw some pretty good examples of big artists having a chat and having engagement with their fans online that I haven't seen before, because that was the only way actually. So I think from the live music industry point of view, it's not a good solution for the bands to do free concerts online, of course. But I think some of the bands will benefit from, but some of the artists will benefit from new technology. One good example is the first thing who got sold out in online stores was video equipment for doing live streaming. So I think everybody's into that now.
True. Thank you very much. Now maybe it's time to hear a bit from the publishing industry. I would like to introduce Andreas Nielsen, who works in a Danish music publishers Coda. So Andreas, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, thanks for inviting me to the webinar, and I'm very happy to be among these esteemed colleagues of mine. Coda is a performance rights organization. We handle the performance rights of songwriters and publishers. So that means when music is played in public, that could be TV, concerts, it could also be Spotify and Netflix. Then we license that use and distribute the money to the rights holders, publishers or songwriters. I myself am responsible for our publishers. So about a third of what we distribute is my members, and I have to make sure that they are both seen and heard, but also make sure that we are building solutions that fit those members. Personally, my part in this is that I come from a background of being a publisher. I've also run a record label, so I've sort of touched upon many sides of the music industry as such. And it is that I sort of work from, having that greater overview. So I both work in business development, but also in just pure administration, you could say. For this specific Future of Music webinar, I think we're focusing a lot on COVID-19, and I think that is a very important place and thing to start from. But if we can broaden it out as well, I think my personal hope for the future of music is, of course, that panels like these and in general, the music industry will become, on the business side, a bit more diverse. These are all esteemed colleagues of mine, but we are also all the same kind of white male above 30. So it would be very nice to see a more diverse future. I know I'm part of the problem myself. I fully recognize that I tick all those boxes, but my personal hope for the future is that panels, and I've been on quite a lot of them by now, that they will become a bit more diverse. If we then go to the what we started and what has been discussed, COVID-19, then I think from our side, where we license rights and work with the publishing and songwriting side, I think we're experiencing what everyone else has been seeing. We have seen that live shows have been canceled. They cannot perform because you cannot get more people gathered in one place than 10 in Denmark. You have seen TV and film productions being halted because you cannot put more than 10 people in the same place. So you have to cancel or halt productions. And that also means that all the music license for those films, of course, have been halted for the time being, meaning that I don't think you'll find any part of music in any way that has not been affected. Some positive, of course. You can see that streaming services such as TikTok have had an incredible uptick in the amount of users, but in general, you will not see anyone who hasn't been affected somehow. I think it was Mark Mulligan from Media who did a great survey and sort of did some great research on it, and found that the average working consumer had about 15% more addressable time for entertainment during COVID, meaning that because you don't have commuting to and from work, you had another 15% of your day, you could say, your waking hours to fill out with entertainment. And what was found from that is that basically music has not had a huge uptick. Of course, it's very depending and different from market to market. I mean, it's both countries, but also specific segments. But what we saw, especially in Italy, which was the first place where you had actual data, was that the consumption of music actually on services such as Spotify had gone down. And basically what that showed was that in Italy, it was mostly something that people used on their commute to work. So when they were home, they were using their stereos or they had their TVs on, meaning that you could say supposed positive upside by having more people streaming was actually not something that was seen. Furthermore, the way that streaming works is that it's average revenue per user. So that means that even though more people consume more music, if you still have the same amount of people that subscribe, you just have a lower per stream value. So there's sort of a perceived sort of maybe there was something we could gain from this, but I think what we have generally seen is that it has been in the OTT services, TV, such as Netflix, that have seen incredible amounts of new users join their service, and they have seen a great extra value added. But the way those services work and the way that they pay the rights holders means that it is for a rather narrow amount of music that actually gains from this. So it means in general, if you look at the songwriter side, and I would say the master side as well, there has been great losses. I think especially on the live side, where even though you could say that there is a demand for seeing a band, if it gets canceled tomorrow, there will be a demand the next time, but it's not that. It's very fluid, and you will see that if you play a concert tomorrow, then you are more likely to be able to play a show 6 months in the future. But if you have to play in 6 months in the future, then you cannot play a show the next day. There's not that sort of double up on demand. So there's been quite significant consequences. And fortunately, as was sort of mentioned before, we have a strong system in Denmark. I can't speak for the whole world, but we have a strong system. But that still means that there's a lot of artists that will be compensated a lot less, and there will be a lot of related activities around them that will be compensated a lot less. And that means that in the forthcoming years, and I think it will be ripple effects for many years, there will be less money to invest in new music and new ideas to come out of it. That is the negative, I would say. That is the downside. There's also been some great ideas. We had drive-in concerts in Denmark. I've seen it in other countries as well. It's not something, from what I hear, is that is a profitable venture. It's more of a marketing thing. But I think for those audience people in the audience who participated, it was like a novel and fun idea, and I think people had fun. But I don't think it's something we'll see in the future. I don't think it's going to be a thing. We had live streaming platforms that have sort of proliferated. I think that's really good. I think the ticketed live stream is going to be something we'll see more of in the future, and there could be a move towards that. From a rights perspective, that is something where you can see that the songwriters and the master owners, they will have a potential upside. They can earn some more if they can actually leverage those interesting new developments. But that is to be seen. I think to begin with, it's most important to, as was pointed out, that most of these live streams are for free. So that means that you're essentially giving away your product for free, and you're actually investing a lot of money in getting a sort of a proper production up and running. So it's two negatives in a way, but then you hope to regain the cost in marketing and you could say exposure. If we look at the overall, I think what has happened, this is a personal belief, I think what COVID-19 has done is basically accelerated existing trends. So we already had a move towards digital, and I think with the way that people have flocked to join Netflix during COVID, and the way that their stock price afterwards has soared, what you're seeing is that normal TV cable is suffering big time because people want that sort of on-demand experience, and it has simply been accelerated. In certain countries, you know, the live news channels will probably have been the most successful TV thing because people want to be updated on the situation. But basically, we've seen an accelerated version of what we were already experiencing, a move towards online, and a better need to understand, or at least attempt to understand the unpredictable. So get a better understanding of data, making sure that you can process it, making sure that you can convert live digital performance into actual money for the performance. And then what I think is going to happen in the future is, and what we're all sort of waiting to see is this going to be a change in culture? Is this going to result in different consumption? Are people going to return to shows as we hope they will? And if not, what will be replaced? Because I've spoken to many managers of many huge Danish artists, or the biggest Danish artists at least in our country, and for all their perspective, they're seeing it as a positive in a way that they're managing talent. So talent is never going to be an unvaluable commodity. So what they're looking at, what they're doing is simply putting their artists to work and saying, okay, if you cannot perform, then you write. And if you can create new material, people will consume it. We will just find out how they will consume it in the future. And from Coda, you could say our responsibility is to make sure that writing music and making successful music is a viable work. So that means that they get compensated for that work. So I'm from the beginning, I mean, I've never worked in music where it hasn't been sort of, I've worked in music 10 years, and in all that time, it's been predicated that music was dying and no one's going to make a living in 10 years. And fortunately, we're not in that situation. So I feel like much like before, and now in an extreme version, we're sort of building the parachute as we're falling. And if you can sort of look away from the very harsh realities of it, there's also something quite exciting about being able to be part of the solution to this. So I think the future is exciting, even though it tends to be sometimes a terrible place to be, or terrifying, not a terrible, terrifying place to be. So that's sort of what I'm thinking.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Miss Robert, would you like to react to Andreas' speech?
I think you're pretty right about all the tendencies in music, and I also think that we're in a positive place in many ways. But how can you just elaborate a little bit on how you see the future revenue streams from live streaming in a COTA perspective, in rights holders perspective?
Yes, of course. So in any sort of online consumption, it is about matching the performance to the underlying work, basically. So we have a database that covers all the works that we represent, that we can license. And for Denmark as a territory, it's the whole world technically. And then for certain parts of online, then there's been carve-out, so people have taken their rights back. So if we look at performances by our own rights holders, then you would say that if there was a new service, you could say existing services such as Twitch, for example.
Like TikTok?
TikTok, exactly. Then the way we license that is we license it where we go in and say, there's different way of licensing it, but basically we're looking at what do they make from it, and then how much should what is the fair share for our rights. And of course, there's a balancing act, because it's not just compensating. It's compensating the creator of the video, it's compensating the creator of the recording, and it's compensating the creator of the song, the writer of the song. So you have to get a balance where those three people groups of people can be compensated, and then also, of course, the product itself, the creators of TikTok. Not that I feel sorry for the creators of TikTok, but it's just important to see that we have 4 people that need to be compensated. And basically, you have a performance, and either through metadata that is reported, so that could be that they have some sort of system, CMS system, some sort of copyright management system that can detect what songs have been played. It could be through, in the case of TikTok, we're using existing master recordings, basically just recordings of songs. And if all the digital service providers, the distributors, make sure that their songs are in TikTok, then you know exactly the master that is coupled with the video. So all we need to do is do the same work that we would do with, for example, Spotify. If we're doing live performances, it's a much different scenario. And then you're looking at either reporting it, or you're looking at some sort of machine learning that can do audio recognition, which is, I mean, even today, something that few can do very successfully, especially when it's not based on a recording that is the same. I don't think maybe anyone has completely cracked that, to be honest. But those are the different words.
I would like to keep track of time. Sorry to interrupt you now, but I hope that during the Q&A we can get back to your point. I would like to move on with success stories and introduce 2 startups from Iceland who have been, in fact, also competing and successfully being awarded the Creative Business Cup some years ago. I would like to give the floor to Hardo Hugoson, who is working in a company called GENKI Instruments, which is pretty fascinating. They have created a ring, as you can see on the slide, so I will not spoil you the surprise. Hardo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Benoit, and thank you for having me on. So I got the pleasure of participating at CBC in 2017 when we had a glued together prototype that barely worked, but people at CBC kind of believed in us, which helped us believe in what we were doing and spurred us on. But let me tell you a little bit about maybe our focus. So we're working more with musicians in the creation process, in the studio, or in the performance on the hardware software side. So it's a bit of a different kind of understanding about the COVID situation, as we've seen people just dive deep into the creating music and getting more into the tech they use and more into the workflow. So we're seeing interesting times of our collaboration. But anyway, let me let me tell you a little bit about what we do. So I'm one of the co-founders of a company called GENKI Instruments. And if you change the slide, it will show you what we're all about. Essentially, what we're trying to do is to make the technology aspect of music, which is the non-human part of it, feel more natural. So the technology part of either making music or performing with music should feel as natural as the organic music creation process. And this started because of an idea back in 2015 of going to live electronic concerts and not really knowing if the person performing on stage was actually doing something, or I mean, some people could just think he was live tweeting the whole thing or just on Facebook. Like the computer on stage created such a barrier between the performer and the audience that it kind of killed off a lot of the vibe that going to live performances should have. So we decided to kind of see what we could do in that aspect, and so two of my co-founders are brilliant electrical engineers. So we started thinking, okay, what can we do with our kind of specialty, engineering and technology, and how can that be applied to music? And as soon as we started speaking to a lot of electronic musicians, we figured out that we were onto something, that they all used a laptop, they all used perfect software to create what they were doing, but they also hated using it. So it allowed them to do so much, but interfacing with it was terrible. So we worked on creating a new interface between the musician and the technology they use. And fast forward 4 years of interesting experiments and gluing together prototypes, going to CPC and talking to a lot of people. Last year, we finally released our first product, which is the ring you see on screen, which is the one I also have on here, called Wave. So Wave is a new way for musicians to interface with the technology they use. So it allows musicians to do whatever they would have been doing with a computer or a slider or knobs, kind of in an inorganic way, to use gestures and motion to express themselves. So a good example, or let's just roll the next video, which shows a few examples of the ring in use. It's really crucial to have sound when showing how it works.
We're going to fix it.
Yeah, no worries. So essentially the musician can set it up to suit his or her setup.
A few experiments with the GENKI Wave Ring.
So if you could just go to the next slide. That was our good friend Andrew Huang, who's a big YouTube influencer and a musician that is probably doing really well now that people are streaming more music and more music-focused content. Kind of going through a lot of the stuff you could do. But essentially what we wanted to do was to allow a musician to use the tools he already knows and he already loves, but to add a human factor to it, to add an organic touch that he could like layer on top of the instruments you already use. So before we go into more, let's just see another example of someone using it kind of in a specific use case, which is a good use case to show what part of the problem we've been tackling is, for example, for composers. You have perfect software that can simulate.
Is it precision? The other thing I really like about the precision of this ring is you can do things like with a small things inside this gigantic scale. So let's say we have a violin line and has an abrupt end. And this is natural. You can coordinate with your hands, like Like these small twists and flicks, like they're harder to do on like smaller controllers, as you can't like jerk them in a natural way. You just have to like. So if you use the ring, you can do what feels natural, and even just making the volume lower, it just feels like you're. And then you welcome it back.
Essentially, so yeah, so that was one of our early users, Victor Ingi, who's the lead audio director at a small indie game studio here in Iceland. But this kind of crystallizes the problem we've been trying to tackle, and a lot of the people in both the hardware and software side of making music have been trying to kind of figure out how there's solutions, how like really easily we can access 1,000 different samples of a kick drum. But a musician doesn't need 1,000 different kick drums. He needs the one kick drum that he can play around with and be expressive with and mess up basically to find that sound he's looking for, to find that organic feeling. And for a lot of the stuff that was usually done, so for example, that video showed him working with strings, and strings are an extremely organic instrument where you have the vibrato and the sound and the performer matters so much. Of course, you'll never replace that, but you'll help people in the studio. You'll help performers by giving them the expressivity to kind of layer on top of this software world of music, or this sometimes called like too perfect world of creating music, and bringing that human element to it. So that's really briefly what the mission that we've been trying to tackle within music has been about, and maybe to layer that into how back in 2015 when we started talking about this, we were these crazy Icelandic dudes with a ring, and nobody was kind of looking at maybe the modular aspect of music and what's been done. But since then we've seen both large corporations such as Rolly bring out the Rolly blocks, where they're allowing musicians to create their own instrument in a modular way to replace the computer and allow you to focus on the music making rather than the software side of it. We've seen Korg do similar things. We've seen Expressive E, a French company, kind of looking into the direction of how can we bring more of the human into the software side, and how can we allow people to express themselves as well as they can in electronic music as it's stepping into more and more aspects of it. We also see the same trends as you discussed earlier with going back to vinyl. You see the same trends in synthesizers with people going back to modular synthesizers. So we have a modular synthesizer receiver for the Ring, and we're seeing tremendous uptake there because the market's just getting bigger. People want the ability to play around with a sound, like with an electric guitar and an amplifier. You poke a hole in the amplifier, there's a different sound. You have a box you play around with, and you try and break that box. So we see a lot of people kind of playing around with that box and trying to make that perfect software box not so perfect, because the kind of the happy accidents of what happens in the search phase is what drives creativity, and also what drives the connection with the audience. So that's the future that we've been trying to work towards, is to help with that connection, both in terms of the creation process and in terms of connecting with the audience.
That's really fantastic. I think everybody is going to take a look at your website as soon as this webinar is over. We are running slightly behind schedule. Before we introduce our last speaker, also from Iceland, I would like to hand the floor back to Caroline for a quick Mentimeter survey.
Right, yes. So to introduce the next speaker, we just have a few questions for you guys. So if you grab your phone again, go to menti.com, use the code 418836. It should be up on your screen in a second. And the first question for you guys to answer is, how many of you studied music as a child? You can go ahead and submit your answer right now. And again, it happens at menti.com. All right, so quite a lot of you studied music as a child. Great. So the next question is, how many of you stopped studying music later on? A few of you kept going and a lot of you stopped. Okay, so Jon, I think this would be the perfect bridge to you and your product. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. This human touch is really key. And I would like to introduce Jon Gunnar Thordarson from the company Mozilla, based in Iceland, who is really working on how to facilitate digital education for children. Jon, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, like you saw there before, 75% of children, they quit music studies in the first 5 years. And the reason is mainly because of lack of motivation in music theory. So what we do at Mozilla is that we try to take the boring elements and make it more fun. So, but do you, is it possible to show the video at this end? Okay.
It's coming up right here. You guys should be able to see it on your screen.
Yes. Well, this is Mozilla, and yeah, now I share. Yeah, this is what we do. And like I said, music education, music theory is the major obstacle in motivation, and music education is also too expensive. And Mozilla is this digital solution of music education. We use gamified learning, skills put in practice, and we use awards and motivation. So the children here inside of our studio, we have gamers that are making know about the gamification, and musicians, and this put together is Mozilla. Our primary age is 6 to 10 years old. We are now in the consumer markets for parents and children at home. And now we have also an increase of schools that are targeting us and want to use Mozilla in the schools. So that is our next option. This is just to show you what has been happening now. Well, Creative Book Business Cup in 2018. We won the Nordic EdTech Awards now in 2019. And so we have been getting awards and recognition, but now we are really seeing new demand of audience and subscriptions. So how does it work? Well, Mozilla is available in 35 languages. It's available in 155 territories on App Store and Google Play. You can choose between these three parts: learn, play, and create. In the learn path, you learn everything from the middle C, just basics, step-by-step skill-building challenges. You learn the violin to recognize the instruments, to recognize the sound of the instruments, to count the beat, to read the melody, and you can slowly start to read sheet music. In the play section, that is the songbook, the Mozilla songbook, full of classical songs and folk music from all around the world. There, you learn slowly to play the song on the instrument, on the piano now, and in the future more instruments. And after every song, you can start to arrange your version of the song with 14 different instruments. And now we also have the possibility of using acoustic instruments with the tone recognition. So we have built-in a tone recognition, and that allows you just to play on any piano without cables. This also gives us opportunity to develop this for more instruments and more innovation like clap recognition that is just coming out now next week. So the children clap and the app listens to them. This is all in the play part, and the creative part, there's the Mozilla DJ where the children start to make loops and make some music, and even Mozilla Planets, that's more an entertainment game, a tilt and tap game similar to perhaps Guitar Hero. But this practice, this is very good for teachers and parents if they want to choose just to pick on each subject that they want to focus on. So this is Mozilla, and so how have we been doing now in the last months during the COVID crisis? Well, we started to see a lot of increase, a huge increase, and we more than tripled the subscription rate. And it happened also aligned with the closing of the schools. So we started to see increase in Italy and Spain and Norway, Denmark, and slowly just around Europe. This also gives us focus to these countries that we will keep on in the future, just to translate it to these languages, also the advertising. But it also gave us focus on thinking about these markets that we didn't put focus on before, like in Italy, the Italians are music lovers, of course, and we need to keep on there, also in the educational market. And so now we are mainly looking for partners for the distribution, because we see a lot of demand, but we want to reach not hundreds of thousands people, we want to reach millions. And that is only done with partnership or with articles in music magazines like GAFFA or anything. But we just want to let everyone know about us because we want to enable everyone to learn music. Yes.
I think that's great. I think that's the first step. You are building the clients for Haraldur, so you are working as a team, which is very great. I think that one thing you should maybe consider, Jon, is to develop a similar app for adults, because for those of us who had to stop studying music when they grew older, it would be very good to be accompanied in that process. Is there any burning question to our speakers? Now is the time. You can raise your hand. You can also draft your question in the chat box if you wish. I'm looking around if anyone.
I would just like to say that
Yes, Robert, please.
I would gladly do a partnership with you, or sell you some advertisements.
Okay.
But we do actually. We're pretty open. Especially one of our main concern was actually to lose all our business ourselves. But so we decided to be pretty open about all kinds of new partnership, performance-based partnerships. So call me afterwards.
Brilliant.
Mes, very quickly, please.
Yeah, just I just have a brief question for you, Jon. I think this sounds like an amazing product, and you talked about the distribution of your product across territories. But have you encountered any challenges in that regard? Because I was sort of immediately thinking that the way you talk about music theory, this is Western music theory in very sort of traditional note-based sense. So, well, I just wondered.
Well, we have a lot of interest in Asia, and recently we did a deal with NetEase in China of distribution in China. So I think it is Western music theory, but that is taught all over the world, almost everywhere, except in India. They don't use this type of notation, but we can see our app used all over, and that is actually quite equal all over. And when we are asked to define our key markets, that's quite difficult for us, because it is all over, and I guess that's a good thing as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. Yes,
I have a question for GENKI, which I thought was a really good presentation and very exciting as well for me, and also being used to be a musician. The ring itself, is it on the market or is it only on the development stage?
So it's on the market. So we launched. So we did a crowdfunding back in 2018 and shipped to everyone last summer. So we've been selling it since August of last year. So we also, as Jon said, have a hard time defining our category, because now we have 1,500 people all over the world using it, ranging from artists using it live, well, not right now, but traveling to touring with it, using it live, but producers and performers all over the world.
Yeah. So what is the price of the ring?
So the price, so the software, so the ring is $200, and we've developed software that is mainly to customize every aspect of the ring. So you can customize what motions are working, how big they are, how sensitive they are, but it's meant to work with essentially any music software you already use. Our software acts as a layer, so it kind of just fits into your workflow. So we're not changing your workflow, but adding to it.
And it's via Bluetooth or?
Yeah, so via Bluetooth, unless you have a modular receiver. And actually later this month, we're partnering with a Chinese firm, or Chinese-French firm called CME, which is developing a MIDI receiver for Bluetooth. So we'll package them together. So any hardware synthesizer or anything that has MIDI in could directly take messages from the ring.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Robert. I would like to wrap up now. This was CBN Webinar Series, 12 episode today dedicated to the future of music. Thank you very much to my 5 speakers for their insightful contributions, and thank you to all of you who took the time to be with us today. This will be repeated in the future. Next week there will be new webinars, so please check on the website what's going to happen. And we will anyway go live very soon during Bright 2020, a full week dedicated to creative industries that will be run online by CBC. So again, I'm inviting you to take a look at the website, and you will see the program being put together in the coming days. Thanks again for your participation, and hopefully let's all play back when we are home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Dun, dun, dun.